There is no sky here. No horizon. No sunrise to mark a new beginning or sunset to promise rest. There is only metal, layer upon layer of ancient steel, groaning softly as it holds together something far larger than any mind was ever meant to comprehend. The Imperial Space Station drifts through the void like a floating city grave, older than the memories of those who inhabit it, older than most of the records that claim to explain why it exists at all. For the millions who call it home, it is not a marvel of engineering or a symbol of imperial power. It is simply the world. The only world they will ever know. Life inside the station does not begin with a name. It begins with a designation. A number. A function. Somewhere deep within the hab levels, where recycled air wheezes through rusted vents and lumen strips flicker like dying stars, a child is born to the sound of alarms and chanting prayers. The walls sweat condensation. The floor vibrates faintly with the pulse of reactors light years removed from sunlight. The newborn's first breath is filtered, processed, and owned by the station. Before the child can cry, a sigil of the Emperor is pressed into a data slate, marking another soul accounted for, another life added to the endless ledger of service. No one tells the child what the sky looks like. Most of the adults do not know themselves. Generations have lived and died within these corridors, passing down second-hand descriptions of stars like forbidden myths. To them, space is not beauty, it is terror, a lethal emptiness beyond the hull that would kill them in seconds if the station ever failed. They are taught early that the station protects them, that its walls are sacred, that every bolt and cable is a blessing from the Emperor himself. To doubt the station is to doubt survival. To question it is heresy. As the child grows, they learn the rhythms of this artificial existence. Time is not measured in days or hours, but in sirens and work cycles. Sleep comes when the lights dim, if they dim at all. Meals are tasteless blocks of nutrient paste dispensed by machines no one alive remembers building. Education is brief and brutally practical. You learn your prayers. You learn your duty. You learn which corridors are safe, and which are sealed off behind warning sigils that mean, do not ask. Curiosity is not encouraged. Curiosity gets people reassigned. The station hums constantly, a deep, omnipresent vibration that seeps into bones and dreams. Some say it is the voice of the machine spirit, whispering its eternal needs. Others say it is simply the sound of decay being held at bay by faith and force. Pipes knock behind the walls. Distant clangs echo through decks that seem too large to be empty, too hollow to be safe. Every resident learns, instinctively, to ignore the screams. They tell themselves it is just machinery venting pressure. It has to be. From the lowest maintenance worker to the highest deck overseer, everyone understands one unspoken truth: the station does not exist for them. They exist for the station. Their labor keeps the reactors stable. Their obedience keeps order intact. Their lives are fuel, replaceable, expendable, and endlessly consumed in the name of the Imperium's survival. Somewhere far away, worlds burn and wars rage, but here, inside this steel cathedral, existence is quieter, slower, and far more suffocating. There are no heroes born here. Only survivors. Children learn to keep their heads down, their voices low, their thoughts carefully aligned with doctrine. They learn to fear the robed figures of authority, whose footsteps echo long before they appear. They learn that punishment is not always loud. Sometimes people simply vanish. A bunk lies empty. A name disappears from the roster. The station absorbs them, and life goes on without pause. Yet despite everything, people still live. They form families in cramped hab units no larger than storage closets. They tell stories in whispers, careful not to let nostalgia turn into forbidden longing. They fall in love beneath flickering lights. They argue, hope, pray, and endure. Because endurance is the highest virtue the station demands. Not happiness, not freedom, just the ability to keep functioning. The station rewards obedience with continuation. As long as you work, as long as you believe, As long as you do not look too closely at the cracks spreading through the metal and the lies spreading through the sermons, you are allowed to exist. And for many, that is enough. Because to imagine another life, one with open skies and real stars, is to imagine something you can never reach. Better to accept the walls. Better to accept the hum. Better to accept that this is all there ever was. But even in a place designed to crush thought, doubt finds a way to survive. It hides in questions no one dares ask aloud. Questions like why certain decks are permanently sealed. Why the station keeps growing inward instead of outward. Why records contradict each other the further back you read. And most dangerous of all, whether the station is truly protecting its people, or merely using them until nothing remains. Because the Imperial Space Station is not just a place where people live. It is a system that shapes how they think, how they fear, and how they die. To understand life inside it, you must first understand this simple truth. From the moment you are born, the station is already deciding how you will be used. And it never makes mistakes. If you stay with me until the very end of this story, you'll understand not just how people live inside an Imperial Space Station, but why so many never realize they were imprisoned at all. What you're about to hear isn't about grand battles or heroic figures. It's about something far more unsettling. An entire civilization quietly existing inside steel walls, believing this is how life is supposed to be. Birth inside an Imperial Space Station is not a moment of celebration. It is a logistical event. Somewhere deep within the Hab decks, where generations stack atop one another like forgotten files, a new life enters the world to the hiss of pressure valves and the low chant of sanctioned prayers. There is no rush of family gathered around, no warmth of natural light. The air smells faintly of metal and antiseptic oils. The walls are close, always close, pressing in as if reminding the child from the first breath that space is limited, and so is mercy. No one asks who this child will become. That question is irrelevant. What matters is where the child will be assigned. Long before they learn to speak, their future has already been mapped out by data scribes who have never seen their face. The station does not care about dreams or talents. It cares about output. Every birth is a calculation. Every life is a resource. Children grow up believing the station is eternal. They are taught that it existed before their grandparents, before recorded time, before even the oldest prayers. The idea of a planet, a place where gravity is constant and the ground does not hum beneath your feet, is spoken of only in sanctioned lessons, stripped of beauty and wonder. Worlds are dangerous, they're told. Worlds fall. Worlds rebel. The station is safe. The station is loyal. The station is pure. From an early age, children learn the sound of alarms the way others might learn birdsong. Each tone has meaning. Each signal demands obedience. When the warning siren echoes through the decks, conversations stop instantly. Bodies move before minds catch up. Fear is not dramatic here, it is disciplined, precise, and deeply ingrained. Even play is regulated. Children mimic work routines in their games, pretending to maintain systems they barely understand, rehearsing the lives they will inevitably inherit. Education is brief and unforgiving. You learn to read enough to understand instructions. You learn to count enough to track quotas. You memorize prayers not because they comfort you, but because forgetting them is dangerous. History lessons are selective. The Imperium is eternal. The Emperor is divine. The station serves his will. Anything else is unnecessary detail. As they grow older, children begin to notice the boundaries. Doors sealed with symbols they are told never to question. Corridors that abruptly end in bulkheads marked, access denied, in fading script. They notice how some adults avert their eyes when certain decks are mentioned. They notice that asking too many questions makes supervisors uncomfortable. Silence, they learn, is safer than curiosity. Family units exist, but they are fragile things. Parents love their children, but that love is shaped by fear. They teach obedience not out of cruelty, but survival. They pass down unspoken rules: never stand out, never complain, never draw attention. Because attention invites scrutiny, and scrutiny invites reassignment. And reassignment is a word that never comes with explanations. The station's presence is constant. Its vibrations lull people to sleep and invade their dreams. Some claim they can feel its moods, that the station grows restless during heavy activity or unusually quiet when something has gone wrong. The tech priests insist this is superstition, yet they themselves speak to machines in reverent whispers, anointing consoles with sacred oils. Children watch these rituals with wide eyes, absorbing the lesson that machinery is not just equipment, it is authority made tangible. By adolescence, most have already been slotted into preparatory labor. Cleaning conduits, sorting data scrolls, assisting maintenance crews in tasks too dull or dangerous for experienced workers. Injuries are common, complaints are rare, pain is treated as a temporary inconvenience in service to something far greater. The idea that life could be different never fully forms, because there is nothing to compare it to. And still, the station keeps moving. It consumes years the way reactors consume fuel, steadily, relentlessly, without pause. Births replace deaths, shifts replace days, lives blur together until individuality becomes a liability rather than a gift. Most people never leave the deck they were born on. Some never even see another section of the station at all. Yet beneath all of this, something else grows. A quiet unease. A feeling that the station, for all its sermons of protection and order, demands more than it gives. People feel it when they hear distant impacts echo through the hull. When lights flicker without explanation. When prayers feel less like devotion and more like insurance against catastrophe. Because deep down, even those raised entirely within steel understand one thing instinctively. If the station ever decides you are no longer useful, no amount of loyalty will save you. So as we move forward, remember this: the Imperial Space Station does not raise children. It prepares them. It shapes them into components, installs them where needed, and replaces them when they fail. And the most terrifying part isn't that this system exists. It's that for those born inside it, this system feels normal. If you were born inside the station, there comes a moment when childhood simply ends. Not with ceremony, not with acknowledgement, but with assignment. One day you wake to the same siren you have always known, and instead of being told where to learn, you are told where to work. From that moment on, your existence is no longer preparation. It is production. The Imperial Space Station does not run on schedules the way planets do. There are no mornings or nights, only cycles, endless, grinding cycles marked by klaxons and lumen shifts. When the work siren sounds, millions move at once, flowing through corridors like blood through veins, each body knowing where it belongs without needing to think. Thinking slows efficiency. Efficiency is survival. Labor here is not chosen, it is inherited, calculated, or imposed. Children of maintenance crews often find themselves crawling through service shafts before their bones have fully hardened. Those with steady hands and sharp eyesight are pushed toward data scribing, copying endless strings of information they will never be allowed to understand. Others are sent deeper, to sanitation levels, recycling vats, reactor-adjacent zones where the air tastes wrong and protective gear is never quite adequate. Every role is vital. Every role is replaceable. The station teaches this lesson early and reinforces it daily. You are important only insofar as you function. When you falter, the system does not rage or mourn. It compensates. Someone else fills the gap. The machine continues. Workdays stretch until exhaustion becomes normal. Sleep is rationed, not to rest the mind, but to preserve the body just enough to keep it operational. Meals are consumed quickly, often standing, the same nutrient-paced day after day. Hunger fades, replaced by a dull acceptance. Pleasure is inefficient. Desire is dangerous. Supervisors walk the lines constantly, robed figures carrying data slates filled with quotas and warnings. Their voices are calm, rehearsed, almost gentle. Punishment is rarely dramatic. A missed quota leads to reassignment. Reassignment leads to harsher work. Harsher work leads to disappearance. The station does not need to threaten. Everyone already understands the sequence. Over time, people stop marking their age. Years blur together into one continuous shift. Birthdays are forgotten. Loss becomes routine. When a coworker fails to report for duty, there is a brief silence, a recalculation of workload, and then hands move faster to compensate. Grief is inefficient. The station does not allow inefficiency to linger. Yet even here, in the grinding monotony of endless labor, the station shapes belief as carefully as it shapes behavior. Workers are told that suffering is sacred, that endurance is devotion, that every aching joint and burned hand brings them closer to the Emperor's favor. The idea is repeated so often it becomes internal truth. People begin to feel pride in their exhaustion. They boast quietly about how many cycles they have worked without rest. They measure worth not in joy, but in how much pain they can withstand without breaking. The environment itself enforces submission. Corridors narrow in older sections, ceilings lower as if the station is slowly pressing down on its inhabitants. The air grows warmer near power conduits, colder near void-facing bulkheads. Somewhere, always somewhere, something is leaking: steam, coolant, radiation, information. Warning sigils are painted over older warnings, layers of caution burying forgotten disasters. And beneath it all, there is sound. The constant hum of reactors. The rhythmic thud of distant machinery. The faint, irregular noises no one likes to acknowledge. Some workers swear they hear voices in the walls during long shifts. Others claim entire decks shift position when no one is looking. Official doctrine dismisses such thoughts as fatigue-induced hallucinations. Fatigue, after all, is universal here. But cracks form anyway. A worker begins to wonder why certain tasks are deliberately underdocumented. Why maintenance teams are sent into sections marked as decommissioned, only to return shaken, or not at all. Why the station's population numbers never seem to decrease, no matter how many disappear. These thoughts are dangerous, and so most people bury them beneath routine, beneath prayer, beneath exhaustion. Because asking what the station truly needs from them invites another, far more terrifying question. What happens when the station decides it needs more than labor? Inside an Imperial Space Station, belief is not optional. It is engineered. It seeps into every corridor, every announcement, every sanctioned pause between shifts. Faith is the glue that holds a population together when logic would otherwise demand revolt. The Emperor is not presented as a distant ruler, but as a constant presence, watching through surveillance lenses, listening through Vox relays, judging through the outcomes of every malfunction and accident. When systems run smoothly, it is his blessing. When they fail, it is his warning. Shrines are built into the station's architecture as naturally as power conduits. Small alcoves glow dimly with candles made from recycled fats. Icons of the Emperor stare outward with eyes that seem to follow passers-by. Workers stop instinctively, murmuring prescribed prayers before continuing on their way. Not because they believe the ritual will save them, but because not performing it feels wrong, dangerous, even. In a place where survival depends on fragile systems, superstition becomes logic. The tech priests reinforce this belief with careful precision. Draped in red robes and augmented with metal limbs, they are seen less as people and more as living extensions of the station itself. They speak in binary chants and sacred litanies, praising the machine spirits that supposedly dwell within every circuit and piston. To the average worker, these figures are both terrifying and reassuring. They are the only ones who seem to truly understand the station, and the only ones who can punish it when it grows displeased. Malfunctions are never just mechanical failures. They are signs. A pressure seal rupture is blamed on impure thoughts. A power fluctuation becomes evidence of insufficient devotion. When accidents happen, and they happen often, investigations focus less on faulty design and more on moral failure. Someone prayed incorrectly. Someone skipped a shrine. Someone questioned orders internally, even if they never spoke the doubt aloud. This constant association between faith and survival reshapes how people think. Over time, they stop separating cause and consequence. Bad things happen because someone failed spiritually. Good things happen because obedience was sufficient. It is a closed system of belief, impossible to argue against from within. To doubt it is to risk becoming the reason for the next disaster. Public sermons are broadcast regularly through the station's Vox network. They are calm, rhythmic, and relentless. The emperor protects. The station endures. Sacrifice is holy. The words wash over exhausted minds, filling the spaces where rebellion might otherwise grow. Listeners repeat the phrases silently while working, using them as mental anchors to keep panic at bay. But faith is not only imposed. It is also clung to. When you live surrounded by metal that could tear itself apart at any moment, belief becomes a form of psychological armor. People pray not because they are devout, but because prayer offers structure in a world with none. It gives meaning to suffering that would otherwise feel unbearable. If pain serves a divine purpose, then it is easier to endure. Yet beneath the surface, cracks appear here as well. Some workers notice inconsistencies in the doctrine. Prayers change subtly over time. Older litanies are declared heretical and quietly erased. Tech priests disagree with one another behind closed doors. Machines respond unpredictably despite perfect ritual adherence. These moments are unsettling not because they suggest the station is flawed, but because they suggest faith may not be enough. Whispers begin in places where surveillance is weakest. Maintenance tunnels. Storage holds. During brief moments between shifts when exhaustion lowers caution. People speak of decks that were once fully populated and are now sealed without explanation. Of entire work crews reassigned to special duties that no one can define. Of records that contradict official population data. These rumors never last long. Someone always reports them, or they simply stop being repeated. Fear keeps most silent, but silence does not erase awareness. It only pushes it deeper. For some, the realization comes slowly, like a pressure leak you can't quite locate. For others, it arrives suddenly, triggered by a single moment, a prayer unanswered, a ritual failing, a death that makes no sense even within doctrine. In that instant, the station's carefully maintained illusion wavers. And once you begin to wonder whether faith is used to control rather than protect, you can never fully unthink the question. Because if the Emperor's will is invoked to justify everything the station does, then what does that say about the things the station is hiding? Every Imperial Space Station has areas that do not appear on any public schematic. Decks marked only by redacted symbols. Access points sealed behind layers of authorization that no living worker officially possesses. The existence of these places is never acknowledged, yet everyone knows about them. They are referred to in lowered voices as if speaking too loudly might draw their attention. The hidden levels. The forgotten decks. The places where the station's rules change. Most people encounter them by accident, or so it seems. A maintenance worker is sent to reroute power after a minor fluctuation. A data scribe is instructed to verify corrupted records that lead further and further down a directory no one remembers creating. A sanitation crew follows a blockage deeper than usual, past warning sigils so old their paint has peeled away. Orders are followed because orders are always followed. Turning back is not an option. The air changes first. It grows colder, thicker, tinged with something metallic and wrong. Lumen strips flicker erratically, casting shadows that seem too large for the bodies that make them. The hum of the station shifts pitch here, deeper and slower, as if the machinery is straining under memories it would rather forget. These decks are older than the rest of the station. Their architecture is cruder, heavier, built for a purpose long since abandoned or redefined. Bulkheads bear impact scars that were never repaired. Data terminals display error messages in archaic code. Some doors are welded shut from the outside, warning symbols layered over one another until their meanings blur into pure threat. And yet, there are signs of life. Faint vibrations beneath the floor. Heat signatures where no systems are listed. Scratches along walls at heights no known machinery should reach. In some sections, there are makeshift shrines, crude, desperate imitations of sanctioned worship, constructed from scrap and bone. Someone was here. Someone lived here. Perhaps someone still does. Records, when they can be accessed at all, tell conflicting stories. Entire populations listed as relocated, without destination. Resource allocations that continue long after a deck is declared decommissioned. Emergency protocols referencing contingencies that no longer exist. The deeper one goes, the more it becomes clear that the station has not merely expanded over time, it has buried itself. Some workers report hearing voices echo through these forgotten corridors. Not the distorted murmurs of Vox interference, but actual speech, ragged, strained, pleading. Others claim they see movement just beyond the reach of the lights. Figures retreating into darkness with a speed that feels unnatural. Official investigations attribute these experiences to stress, fatigue, or oxygen deprivation. The affected individuals are reassigned. They rarely speak again. The most unsettling discovery is not what these hidden levels contain, but why they exist at all. These decks were not abandoned because they failed. They were sealed because they succeeded at something the Imperium no longer wishes to remember. Experimental habitats. Emergency population overflow zones. Containment areas for temporary measures that became permanent. When those measures outlived their usefulness, the solution was not evacuation. It was erasure. Over time, the station continued operating as if nothing had happened. New decks were built. New populations were born. The sealed levels faded into myth. But myths do not require truth to persist, only fear. And fear thrives in places where answers are forbidden. For those who glimpse these hidden sections, the station is never the same afterward. The hum feels less comforting, more predatory. Orders feel less sacred, more calculated. Faith feels thinner, stretched across too many contradictions. You begin to notice how often authority deflects rather than explains. How frequently, necessary sacrifices are mentioned without ever being defined. Most people who uncover these truths try to forget them. Forgetting is safer. Forgetting allows life to continue. But forgetting is a skill, and not everyone masters it. Because once you understand that the station is capable of sealing away entire worlds within itself, worlds made of people, you are forced to confront a terrifying possibility. The hidden levels are not relics of the past. They are rehearsal. At first, nothing seems different. The sirens still sound. The shifts still begin and end with mechanical precision. Workers still move through corridors in silent lines, heads down, hands steady. The station is very good at pretending nothing is wrong. That is, perhaps, its greatest strength. But for those who have seen too much, those who have walked the hidden levels or noticed the fractures in doctrine, routine no longer brings comfort. It brings dread. Every announcement feels rehearsed. Every assurance of stability sounds hollow. When authorities insist that systems are operating within acceptable parameters, people begin to listen not to the words, but to the tone behind them. The first signs are small and easily dismissed. A brief loss of gravity on a mid-level deck. A temperature fluctuation that lingers too long before correction. A delay in ration distribution blamed on clerical error. Each incident is explained, categorized, forgotten. Individually, they mean nothing. Together, they form a pattern. Faith is deployed aggressively as uncertainty spreads. Vox sermons increase in frequency. Mandatory prayer cycles are extended. Tech priests perform highly visible rituals, chanting louder and longer than necessary, as if volume alone can silence doubt. The message is clear, the station is strong, the Emperor watches, and anyone who feels afraid has already failed. Yet fear continues to grow, precisely because it is never acknowledged. Workers begin to notice inconsistencies in orders. Entire sections are suddenly restricted without explanation. Maintenance teams are rerouted repeatedly, never allowed to complete full diagnostics. Data scribes are instructed to overwrite records rather than correct them. Questions are met with reassignment. Reassignment comes faster now. Then come the lockdowns. Bulkheads slam shut without warning, isolating decks for hours or days. Air recycling is reduced to conserve resources. Movement between levels is restricted to essential personnel only, though no one seems able to define what essential means anymore. People sleep where they work. Families are separated by sealed corridors, able to communicate only through distorted Vox channels that may or may not be monitored. Rumors explode in the vacuum left by official silence. Some say the station has suffered irreparable structural damage. Others claim a catastrophic reactor failure is being hidden to prevent panic. A few whisper that something from the hidden levels has breached containment. None of these theories can be confirmed, and that uncertainty is its own kind of torture. What becomes impossible to ignore is this: the station is prioritizing itself. Life support functions are redirected away from civilian hab decks toward core systems. Lighting is dimmed permanently in non-essential areas. Entire populations are placed on reduced oxygen rations without explanation. When complaints arise, the response is chillingly uniform. Sacrifice is necessary. Endurance is holy. For the first time, people begin to understand the implications of that language. The station was never designed to save everyone. Emergency protocols surface in fragmented data logs, procedures meant to preserve critical systems at any cost. Population reduction measures euphemistically labeled as load balancing. Historical references to previous crises that ended with phrases like acceptable losses achieved. The truth becomes undeniable. In moments of danger, the station does not protect its inhabitants. It selects which ones are allowed to remain. Panic simmers beneath enforced calm. People hoard rations. Prayers become frantic, desperate, stripped of ritual elegance. Families argue in whispers about whether to flee deeper into the station or stay where they are known and accounted for. Every choice feels wrong, because every choice is being made inside a system designed to deny agency. Authority responds with force cloaked in order. Armed enforcers patrol corridors that were once considered safe. Public detentions increase. People accused of spreading destabilizing narratives were removed in full view of others, dragged away not as criminals but as examples. The message is unmistakable: obedience is no longer enough. Silence is required. And through it all, the station continues to function. That is the most horrifying realization of all. No matter how many are lost, no matter how much fear spreads through its decks, the Imperial Space Station does not falter. It adapts. It recalculates. It prepares. Because this is not a malfunction. This is a contingency. The moment it becomes clear that the station is choosing who lives, everything changes, even if nothing appears to change at all. The corridors remain intact. The reactors still hum. The sermons continue to speak of unity and sacrifice. But beneath the surface, a silent reckoning begins. People start to notice how decisions are made. Which decks receive full power during shortages? Which hab levels are evacuated first during pressure failures, and which are sealed without comment? Entire populations are quietly reclassified as non-essential, a word that carries more weight than any sentence ever spoken aloud. Once assigned that label, you are no longer a person in the station's logic. You are mass. You are strain. You are a problem to be solved. Air grows thinner in the lower levels. Not catastrophically so, just enough to weaken, to slow, to dull the senses. Official statements call it a temporary fluctuation. Medical teams distribute mild stimulants and assure everyone that conditions are stable. But stability here does not mean safety. It means control. Families begin to fracture under pressure. Parents argue over whether to report neighbors who seem unstable, knowing that reporting might earn favor, or simply delay the inevitable. Friends stop sharing rumors, unsure who might repeat them to the wrong authority. Trust erodes quickly when survival feels scarce. The station does not need to turn people against each other. It only needs to let fear do the work. In some sections, the lights never fully return after a blackout. Darkness becomes permanent, punctuated only by emergency strips casting everything in red. Movement is restricted, for safety reasons, but safety feels increasingly selective. People sleep less. Dreams become filled with alarms, sealed doors, and the sensation of being watched by something vast and indifferent. Then the announcements change. They are still calm, still measured, but the language grows colder. Phrases like population optimization and system integrity preservation appear with alarming frequency. The emperor's will is invoked more often than ever, not as comfort but as justification. Sacrifice is no longer presented as a noble possibility. It is presented as an obligation. Those who resist do not form rebellions. Rebellion requires hope, coordination, belief in an alternative. None of those things survive long here. Instead, resistance takes smaller, quieter forms. People hide extra rations. They reroute power to have units not marked for shutdown. They falsify data to keep names off reassignment lists. These acts are not heroic. They are desperate, and they are punished swiftly when discovered. The station tightens its grip. Bulkheads seal permanently now, not temporarily. Vox channels are filtered so heavily that messages arrive delayed, fragmented, or not at all. Armed enforcers no longer bother explaining their presence. They stand at intersections and access points, faceless behind helmets, enforcing rules that change without notice. When they remove someone, it is done efficiently, almost gently. Violence is minimized. Efficiency is maximized. And still, the station does not feel angry. It feels focused. That is the most disturbing realization for those still capable of reflection. The station is not lashing out in panic. It is executing a plan written long before any of the current inhabitants were born. Emergency doctrines layered beneath doctrines, contingencies stacked like coffins inside a vault. This has happened before. The evidence is there, buried in corrupted archives and sealed decks. Previous generations faced the same moment, the same choice, and they were found insufficient. As oxygen grows scarce and power is funneled inward toward critical systems, people begin to understand the true scale of their insignificance. They were never meant to escape. They were never meant to be saved. They were meant to keep the station alive long enough for something else, someone else, to benefit. And when that purpose is fulfilled, their continued existence becomes optional. The Imperial Space Station does not hate its inhabitants. It does not mourn them. It does not even notice them individually. It simply moves forward, deciding, with perfect mechanical indifference, who will be allowed to move forward with it, and who will be left behind in the dark. When the storm finally passes, when the alarms stop echoing and the corridors fall silent for the first time in years, there is a hollow clarity. The Imperial Space Station continues to breathe, its reactors humming steadily, its systems cycling as if nothing had changed. The survivors, if they can even be called that, move slowly through the decks, their bodies weakened, their minds sharpened by exhaustion and terror. They look at one another with a mixture of relief and disbelief, knowing that what they endured was not an accident. It was intended. Those who remain are forever altered. Names that once held identity have faded into designations. Faces that once smiled or cried now stare blankly, accustomed to seeing others disappear without explanation. They carry with them the memories of the hidden levels, the locked decks, the vanished families and friends, memories no one will officially acknowledge. Faith, once a source of comfort, now feels like a tool used to control them. Obedience, once a virtue, now feels like a trap they barely survived. Yet life continues. The station does not mourn. It does not pause. It regenerates. Hab decks are cleaned, rations are restored, data scribes resume their endless copying. Children are born into steel, taught from the first breath that this is all they will ever know. The cycle repeats, just as it has for countless generations, and will continue for countless more. The station is eternal. The individual is not. And still, in quiet moments, survivors remember. They remember the choices forced upon them, the sacrifices demanded without consent, the cold calculus that decided who lived and who did not. They remember the shadows moving just beyond the lumen strips, the whispers from sealed corridors, the hum that never truly stopped. And they understand something profound and terrifying. The station endured because it was never meant to fail. They survived, if they can even call it survival, because the station allowed it, briefly, selectively, and without mercy. In the end, the Imperial Space Station remains as it always was. A city, a prison, a machine, and a god unto itself. Lives pass through it, molded, used, consumed. It continues to hum and grow, indifferent to individual triumph or tragedy, eternally preparing for the next cycle, the next population, the next inevitable reckoning. And for those who have seen its depths, its secrets, and its decisions, there is a lingering question that will never be answered. If no one remembers the dead, did they ever truly live?